Picture a building 7 stories tall. Now fill it with 400 people. Add a stairwell that smells like cabbage water and old urine. A single cold water tap on each floor shared between 12 families. Walls so thin you can hear the man in the next apartment cough up his lungs at 3 in the morning. The windows face either a brick wall 4 feet away or a street so loud it doesn't matter that there's a window at all. Now set the whole thing in New York City in the summer of 1887 and tell the temperature inside to stay at 92 degrees Fahrenheit. In the shade, at midnight. That's a tenement. And when I say tenement, I don't mean a rough neighbourhood or a run-down building in the modern sense of those words. I mean something specific. I mean the kind of building designed deliberately and consciously to fit the maximum number of human beings into the minimum amount of space, while still technically complying with whatever law happened to be in effect at the time. I mean a place where the landlord calculated not square footage, but cubic feet of breathable air, and where breathable is doing a lot of heavy lifting as a word. I mean a building where the architectural innovation of the era, the thing that was genuinely considered a step forward in housing reform, was punching a narrow shaft about 2.5 feet wide into the middle of the structure between buildings so that the interior rooms would have something other than a solid brick wall outside their windows. That shaft, by the way, was called an air shaft, and what it actually did was collect garbage, trap cooking smells from 6 floors of simultaneous dinner preparation, and in the summer act as a kind of chimney in reverse. Instead of drawing heat upward and out, it pulled it in, circulated it, breathed it back into every room that was supposed to benefit from fresh air. The men who built these things received awards. I'm not joking, there were architectural competitions. The dumbbell tenement, named for its shape when viewed from above, narrow in the middle where the air shafts indented each side, won a design prize in 1879. A prize for buildings that would go on to kill thousands of people a year, mostly children, mostly in summer, mostly from diseases that thrive exactly when ventilation fails and heat climbs and bodies are packed too close together. But that's the thing about New York in 1887. The killing was happening constantly, right out in the open, and it was practically invisible. Not because people didn't notice, because there was so much else happening at the same time. The richest city in the Western Hemisphere and the most densely populated slum on the planet were the same place, the same island, the same zip code, if zip codes had existed yet. And in the middle of all of it, people did what people always do when the official structures fail them. They found a way. They went up. I'm Henry. I make these history stories, and I have no idea if you actually sleep to them, or if you just lie there in the dark learning terrible things about 19th century urban planning while pretending to yourself that you'll fall asleep any minute now. Either way, get comfortable. The roof is waiting. Here we go. Your eyes are already open when it happens, not a gradual waking, not the soft confusion of someone drifting up from sleep. One moment you're lying on a folded blanket on the tar-covered roof of 97 Orchard Street, with your arm over your eyes and your shirt soaked through with sweat, and the next moment you're awake and you're listening and something is wrong. Not wrong. Different. The quality of the air has changed. It's still hot. It's July and it's New York, and hot is the only setting the air has right now, has had for 3 weeks without interruption. But there's something moving through it. Not a breeze exactly, more like the memory of a breeze, like the air a few blocks away shifted, and a small portion of that shift made it this far before losing interest. It touches your face for maybe 4 seconds. Then it's gone. You lie there in the dark and wait for it to come back. It doesn't. Around you, the roof is full of people sleeping, or trying to sleep, or giving up on sleep and just lying there in the heat, staring at the sky, which in 1887 New York is never actually dark. Too many gas lamps on the streets below. Too much coal burning in too many furnaces even in July, because the steam laundries run around the clock and the bakeries start their fires at 2 in the morning, and there are more people per square mile on this particular block in Manhattan than anywhere else on the surface of the earth. And people generate heat just by existing, by breathing, by the sheer biological fact of being alive in large numbers. The sky is the colour of a bruise, purple where it's darkest, orange at the edges above the roof lines. You can see maybe a dozen stars if you look directly overhead. The rest are washed out. There is no countryside quiet here. There is no such thing as silence on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the summer of 1887. Even at 2 in the morning, which is roughly when you are, the city is doing something. Several things, simultaneously and without apology. From Orchard Street below, the sound of a horse, single horse, pulling something heavy. The metal wheel rims on cobblestones are a sound that gets into your bones when you first arrive, and eventually becomes something you can sleep through, or almost sleep through, except on nights like this when sleep is already out of reach anyway. From the building next door, someone is arguing, not loudly. The specific low-voiced intensity of two people who are trying not to wake everyone else, while also being completely unable to stop. The words come through in fragments through the air shaft. Polish or Yiddish, you can't tell from up here. Maybe both. Half the building is Polish and half is Jewish, and sometimes the same family is both, which is a thing that would have seemed impossible back home and seems perfectly ordinary here. Home. You think that word and then you catch yourself thinking it, because it's been 4 months since you left the village outside Krakow, and you're still not sure which place the word belongs to anymore. Your name is Tomasz Kowalski. You're 18 years old. People here call you Tommy, and you've mostly stopped correcting them because correcting people takes energy you don't have. You came to New York in March with your mother and your 2 sisters, Zofia, who is 12, and Halinka, who is 9, and you found your uncle Stanisław in a boarding house on Hester Street, and he helped you find the apartment on Orchard Street, and he helped you find the job, and he helped you understand the rules of this particular city, which are different from the rules of every other place you have ever been. Your uncle has been here 6 years. He's 31 years old and looks 50. The apartment is on the 5th floor, 4 rooms. You share it with your mother, your sisters, your uncle, his wife Marta, their 3 children who are 6 and 4 and 18 months, and 2 boarders named Loek and Abram, who sleep in the front room and pay $3 a month each for the privilege of a cot and access to the kitchen on a schedule. 12 people, 4 rooms, each room roughly 10 feet by 10 feet, though the kitchen is a little larger, and the bedroom your family uses is so narrow that when both cots are unfolded, there is almost no floor visible between them. In winter, this was manageable, not comfortable. Manageable? In July, it's something else entirely. You came up to the roof on the 14th of June, the night the temperature in the apartment hit 95 degrees at 10 in the evening, and did not drop below 90 by midnight. You folded your blanket under your arm, told your mother you'd be on the roof, and climbed 2 more flights of stairs in the dark. You've been sleeping up here for 3 weeks. You are not alone in this. Look around the roof right now, in the not quite dark of a Manhattan summer night, and count what you can see. Mrs. Birnbaum from the 3rd floor is against the water tower with her youngest daughter, who is maybe 5 years old and has been sick for a week now, with something the other women call the summer complaint and the doctors call by longer names that amount to the same thing. Diarrhea and fever and the slow, dangerous draining away of everything a small body needs to stay alive. The daughter's name is Rivka. She's very quiet right now, quiet in a way that worries the women who notice these things. Next to the chimney stack, 3 men you don't know well are playing cards by the light of a candle stub. Poles or Czechs, you think. One of them works in a factory that makes brushes somewhere on the east side. The other 2 you've heard speak but never learned their trade. They play for pennies, and they play slowly, the way men play cards when the game isn't really about cards, but about having something to do with your hands and an excuse to sit near other people without having to talk. Closer to the street-side parapet, a girl is sitting with her back against the low brick wall, reading a folded newspaper by what amounts to ambient urban light. Her name is Rosa Feldman, and she is 19 years old, and she works in a shirtwaist factory on Delancey Street, and she reads every newspaper she can get her hands on. She reads the Jewish Daily Forward in Yiddish, and she reads the New York Tribune in English that she learned in the 2 years she's been here, and she reads Labour pamphlets and political tracts and anything else that anyone will lend her. Sometimes she reads out loud to whoever will listen. Sometimes she reads to herself with the intensity of someone memorizing, which she often is. You know Rosa to say good morning to. You know her to pass on the stairs. Last week she told you your English was getting better, and you felt something warm in your chest that you haven't fully examined yet. She isn't looking at you right now, she's reading. There are maybe 30 people sleeping or sitting or lying awake on this roof tonight. Some from this building, some from the one that backs onto it, because the buildings share a party wall, and where someone cut a door through 4 years ago, nobody's bothered to close it, and now it's an informal arrangement that everyone understands without it ever being stated. The roof belongs to whoever can get to it. In summer, that means everyone. Beyond the parapet, the city extends in every direction. You can see the top floors of the buildings on Orchard Street, and the flat-roofed tenements of Hester Street, and the gas lamps strung along the elevated railway on 2nd Avenue, which runs on iron trestles about 30 feet above the street, and fills the neighbourhood below it with noise that, during the day, is so loud you have to stop speaking mid-sentence and wait for the train to pass before anyone can hear you finish the thought. At night, the trains run less frequently, but they still run, and every 15 minutes or so one passes and the whole structure trembles with it, and the light from the train windows sweeps across the rooftops, and for a second you can see everything. And then it's gone, and you're back in the bruised purple light of a New York summer night. You roll onto your side on the blanket. The tar under the blanket is still warm. It absorbed the sun all day, and it is releasing that heat slowly, reluctantly, through the night. In another hour or 2 it will be slightly less warm, not cool. The tar on these roofs is never cool in July, but slightly less than body temperature, which is about as close to relief as this particular summer is offering. Your shirt is a problem. You've been wearing the same shirt for 3 days because the laundry situation in the apartment is a negotiation that requires energy, and because in this heat, everything you put on is soaked through within an hour of wearing it anyway. So there's a logic to just keeping it on, but the logic doesn't fully hold up when you're lying on a roof at 2 a.m. and the shirt is pasted to your back, and every place where fabric meets skin feels like a small ongoing argument. You peel it off. The air on your bare back is fractionally better, not cool, just marginally less aggressively hot. You ball the shirt under your head as an extra layer between your skull and the folded blanket, and you stare at the orange-purple sky and you think about the day. The day was long. All the days here are long, but today was longer in specific ways that you're still processing. Let me take you back to it. The morning started the way all mornings start on the 5th floor of 97 Orchard Street in July of 1887. Not gradually, not gently. With the specific and immediate violence of 12 people trying to start their days in 4 rooms simultaneously, and the water tap on the landing, the one cold water tap shared between 3 apartments on the floor, already running its permanent low-pressure trickle of brownish clear water into whatever container someone has left under it. The city water is not reliably clean. This is 1887, and the water supply comes from the Croton Aqueduct system, which is better than it was 20 years ago and worse than people who built it claim. The water itself arrives cold and is not visibly different from water anywhere else. But the pipes it travels through are old, and some of them run near or through areas of the city that are less clean than the city would like to admit. And the result is that you drink the water and you use it, and you try not to think too hard about what might have happened to it on the way from the Westchester watershed to this particular tap on the 5th floor landing. Most people drink tea. Boiling the water kills what's in it. This is practical wisdom passed around the tenement without anyone necessarily knowing the scientific reasons. But the reasons don't matter when the result is that people who drink boiled tea generally get sick less often than people who drink cold water straight from the tap. And in a building of 400 people, less often means something. You heard the tap running at 5:30 in the morning, because the walls of the apartment are not walls in any acoustic sense. They are barriers between spaces, but they're not barriers between sounds. You hear every chair scraping, every pot placed on a stove, every argument and every prayer and every cough in the night, especially the cough, because in 1887, New York, a persistent cough in your neighbour is something you notice and something you track, because you know what it can mean. The building has a schedule, though no one wrote it down. The women are up first, most of them by 5, some earlier. The men who have factory jobs are out the door by 6. The pushcart vendors leave even earlier, because the good spots on Hester Street and Orchard Street fill up before 7, and if you're not there, someone else is. Your Uncle Stanisław leaves at 5. He has a pushcart. He sells pickles and herring from barrels he transports from a warehouse on Essex Street, and he has his spot at the corner of Hester and Ludlow that he has held for 3 years, through a combination of being first to arrive and a working relationship with the beat policeman on that block that costs him 50 cents a week, and which your uncle describes as a tax, because that is what it is. You don't sell pickles, you roll cigars. The cigar factory is on Broome Street, half a mile west. It is owned by a man named Samuel Teitelbaum, who is from Minsk originally, and has been in New York for 20 years, and speaks English well enough that the men below him, the foremen, speak to him in English, and the workers speak to each other in whatever language they came with, and the whole operation functions through a loose mesh of Yiddish and Polish and Italian and Czech and the specific physical language of piecework, which needs no translation. Piecework means you are paid by what you make, not by the hour. This is important. Piecework means that the more you make, the more you earn, which sounds like an incentive and in some ways is, but it also means that if you are slow or sick, or if your hands are not cooperating, you earn less, and that the difference between a good week and a bad week is entirely the difference between what your hands can do in 12 hours versus what they couldn't quite manage. You roll cigars. You have been rolling cigars for 4 months. When you started, you were slow, achingly, catastrophically slow. The wrapper leaf tore, the filler clumped. The finished cigars came out lumpy or too tight or with air pockets that would make them burn wrong, and every failed cigar was either ejected and deducted from your tally or fixed by the foreman in the time it took him to notice and complain. Your fingers have calluses now in places they didn't before. The pad of your right thumb, just at the base, has a specific hardness where it presses the wrapper into the mould hundreds of times a day. The index and middle finger of your left hand have a particular strength they didn't have in March. Not the gross strength of lifting or carrying, a precise, calibrated strength. The kind that knows exactly how much pressure to apply to a leaf that will tear if you're too rough, and hold air if you're too gentle. You can feel quality now in the dark. You can tell from the texture of a wrapper leaf whether it's going to behave. From the resistance when you begin to roll, whether the filler is going to stay, whether the cigar is going to be right. This is not something anyone taught you in words. You learned it the way you learn things in factories, which is by doing it wrong repeatedly until your body understands what your mind hasn't been able to articulate. You make somewhere between 200 and 240 cigars on a good day. The rate is 3 cents per 10, which means a good day earns you 72 cents, a bad day 60 cents, and on the days when the tobacco shipment is late and you spend 3 hours waiting with nothing to roll, you earn nothing for those hours, and there is nothing to be done about that. You bring home roughly $4 a week. The rent on the apartment is $10 a month for the whole apartment, which your uncle and his wife and you and your mother split with the two boarders, which means your share is something less than $2 a month. But then there is food, and the streetcar when you have to take it, and the pennies your mother puts in the envelope that goes to the synagogue on Fridays. Not because your family is particularly observant, but because the synagogue is also where people find out about jobs and where someone looks in on the old man on the second floor who has no family, and where Zofia goes on Saturday mornings, and where your mother feels, for approximately 2 hours a week, something other than desperate. You don't tell her how little margin there is. She knows. She doesn't need you to say it. This morning you woke up on the roof at 5:45, put on the damp shirt, rolled your blanket and carried it back down 5 flights of stairs in the dark. The stairwell smells different at different hours. In the morning it smells of coal smoke and food starting to heat on stoves. By midday it's something more complex. By evening it's everything that's happened in the building all day, compressed. At 5:45 in the morning it's still close to tolerable. Your mother was already in the kitchen, which in this apartment is also the room where the two boarders sleep, and where the family eats, and where your uncle conducts his business calculations on Sunday afternoons with a stub of pencil and a piece of paper he saves and reuses. She was making something on the small stove. Not much. Coffee made from chicory and whatever actual coffee grounds could be stretched to cover the pot, and bread that she'd bought yesterday from the baker on Rivington Street who bakes it in the morning and sells it cheaper in the evening, which means by morning it's already 1 day old, but it's the difference between a loaf and no loaf. She handed you a cup of the coffee without speaking. You drank it standing. There wasn't room to sit because Loic the boarder was still on his cot and Abram was getting dressed, and the kitchen was already containing more people than was comfortable, and it was not yet 6. Your mother said in Polish, "You look tired." You said in Polish, "I'm fine." She looked at you the way mothers look when they know you're not fine, and they are choosing, for now, not to press the point. Helinka, the 9-year-old, appeared from the back room in her nightgown and wrapped her arms around your waist and said nothing. She does this some mornings, just appears and holds on for a moment. You put your hand on the top of her head, which is warm in the way a sleeping child is warm, a specific sustained warmth that has nothing to do with fever and everything to do with the fact that small bodies retain heat like small stones. You kissed the top of her head. She went back to bed. You drank the second half of the coffee. It was not good coffee. It was hot and bitter and brown, and it contained enough actual caffeine to make your brain start working, which is the only criterion that matters at 5:45 in the morning in a Lower East Side tenement in July. Out the door by 6. The stairs going down are different from the stairs going up in a way that's hard to fully explain. Going down, you pass all 5 floors. You see the apartment doors. Some of them are already open because the hallways are cooler than the rooms, or at least different, and people leave their doors open in summer for the circulation, though what circulates through the building's hallways is less fresh air than a kind of shared atmosphere. Everyone's cooking, everyone's preparing for the day. The air in the stairwell at 6 in the morning is an involuntary community meal, where every family's breakfast is contributing something to a collective aroma that you've stopped trying to separate into its components. There is a woman on the 3rd floor whose door is always open and who is always standing in it, every morning, as if the door is a stage and the hallway is her audience. She is small and very old, and she came from somewhere in Russia, and her name, as near as you can tell, is something that gets said differently by everyone who says it. You have heard 3 different pronunciations. You say good morning to her in Polish, and she says something back in Russian, and you both understand what the exchange means, even though neither of you understands the specific words. The street hits you the moment you push through the building's front door, and when I say hits, I mean it in a physical sense. The street is already doing everything the street does, at 6 in the morning, in July, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. There is nothing gentle about it. Orchard Street runs north to south, and in 1887 it is one of the busiest streets in New York, which means it is one of the busiest streets on the planet, because New York in 1887 is the largest city in the United States, and the Lower East Side is where most of its newest residents are concentrated. The density numbers from this period are difficult to believe even when you're reading them in the source documents. In some census tracts in this neighborhood, the population density exceeds 700 people per acre. Let me help you understand what that means. Central Park is 840 acres. If you filled Central Park to the population density of the block your building is on, you'd have roughly 588,000 people standing in a public park. That's more people than lived in the entire city of Baltimore in 1887, on an acre. The street is 30 feet wide between the building faces, and it serves everything simultaneously. Pedestrians and horses and push carts and the delivery wagons that come early to stock the shops, and the men carrying things on their backs, who are called schleppers and have the arms and shoulders to prove it, and the children who are already everywhere, already running, already conducting whatever business 6-year-olds conduct in the hours before their parents are fully awake. You turn south toward Broome Street. The walk is about half a mile. You know it now without thinking about it. The way you knew the walk from the house to the fields back home without thinking about it. Muscle memory, but urban. The specific way to angle through the crowd where Orchard crosses Hester. The place near the corner of Grand where a broken cobblestone makes a lip that will turn your ankle if you're not watching for it. The alley between 2 buildings on the east side of the street where water pools from whatever drainage problem has been unfixed for apparently as long as the buildings have stood, and which smells in July the way things smell when heat is applied to standing water mixed with whatever else the city contributes to that particular puddle. The smell in July is the first thing. Always the smell. It's not one thing. I know I just said that, and I'm saying it again because it needs saying twice. It's not just the smell of a city in summer. It's layers in the way that geology is layers, each one distinct if you know how to read them. There is the baseline smell of coal smoke, which in 1887 is everywhere, because everything that generates heat generates it by burning coal. And the coal smoke of 400,000 stoves and furnaces and steam engines and laundry boilers and bakery ovens has settled into everything. The buildings breathe it. The clothes you wear have absorbed it so thoroughly that even freshly washed they carry a faint mineral darkening that isn't quite a smell anymore, but is more like the memory of a smell. Under that, the horses. There are approximately 150,000 horses in New York City in 1887. They move the carts, pull the carriages, draw the streetcars, haul the freight. Each one produces roughly 22 pounds of manure per day. The math is something you don't need me to do for you. The streets are cleaned technically by a department of the city, but the cleaning schedule doesn't keep up with the production schedule, and in summer the heat accelerates everything, and the smell of horse waste baking on cobblestones is a physical presence in the air that you feel in the back of your throat after a while. Under that, food. So much food. The push carts are loaded by 6. The stall on the corner is already doing business in herring. The buckets of brain and fish sitting open to the morning air. The smell sharp and salt and slightly oceanic, in a way that is almost pleasant if you've grown up with it, and almost unbearable if you haven't. Under that, people. 12 people per room. Multiply it by the buildings on every block. Multiply it by the limited access to water for washing. Multiply it by the heat. Under all of it, below all the top notes, something heavier and harder to name. The smell of a place that is working very hard with insufficient resources, that is processing too many people and too much commerce and too much waste in too small a space. The specific smell of strain. You walk through it every morning without fully registering it anymore, because that's what 4 months of living somewhere does to your nose. Your nose has given up on finding it remarkable and just catalogues it as background. Your co-worker at the factory, a man named Benedetto Caruso, who is from Naples and has been in New York for 7 years and is not related to the famous singer, despite both being named Caruso and both being from Naples and both having opinions about opera, told you once that the smell hits you differently the first time you come back after being away. Go to the country for a week, he said. Come back to the city and you will smell everything all at once for about 20 minutes, the way you smelled it the first time before your nose adjusts again. You haven't been to the country. You can't afford a week in the country, but you believe him. The factory on Broome Street is a 4-story building that was originally something else, a warehouse or a small manufacturing facility, and was converted when Mr. Teitelbaum expanded his operation. The first floor is storage and shipping. The second floor is where the women work, the strippers, separating the tobacco stems from the leaf, which is delicate work that also covers you in a fine tobacco dust that gets into your hair and your skin and tastes faintly of everything tobacco tastes of when you lick your lips at the end of the day. The 3rd and 4th floors are rolling. You go up to the 3rd floor. The room is about 40 feet by 60 feet, and it holds 22 rollers and their benches, the long flat boards worn smooth with use, the tools that each roller keeps in a cloth roll like a surgeon's kit, the moulds and the cutters, and the little dampening pads for keeping the wrapper leaves pliable. The windows on the east side face the building next door 10 feet away, and the windows on the west side face a narrow air shaft that reaches down to a courtyard where the toilet facilities are located, which means the west windows, when open, are theoretically providing ventilation and actually providing something else. The foreman is a man named Doherty, which seems like a strange name for a cigar factory on the Lower East Side, until you understand that the neighbourhood has been many things in succession, and the Irish who were here before the Eastern European wave didn't all leave. Some of them are still here in the same buildings, now subdivided differently, still here in the same businesses, now owned by different men, and Doherty is one of these, a man from County Cork who has been rolling cigars for 20 years, and whose knuckles are permanently curved in the specific curvature of a man who has spent 2 decades forming cylinders with his hands. He does not particularly like you. This is not personal. He doesn't particularly like anyone. He has a theory about the new workers, the Poles and the Russians and the Italians, that they are here to drive down wages, which is not an entirely unfair theory, given that wages at the factory in 1881 were higher per thousand than they are now in 1887, and the population of the factory floor has changed considerably in those 6 years. Whether this is cause and effect, or both effects of a third cause, is an argument being had in meeting halls and newspapers and eventually in the streets. But on the factory floor in 1887, the argument has a human face, and that face is Doherty's. And what it mostly communicates is a weary, low-burning contempt. You say good morning to him, and he looks at your bench, and the way he looks at your bench says, check your setup, and you check your setup, and everything is as you left it last night, and you begin. The tobacco arrives in bundles. The wrapper leaves are kept in a humidor box, a closed wooden cabinet with a damp cloth inside because they need to stay pliable. When you open the box in the morning, the smell is the real smell of tobacco, not the processed smell of a finished cigar or the dusty smell of dry leaf, but the raw-lived smell of something still close to soil and growth and the specific green darkness of a tobacco field in Connecticut or Pennsylvania or Cuba, depending on the grade. You take a wrapper leaf. You hold it up to the light from the east window. This is something Benedetto taught you, not Doherty. Hold it up to the light before you start. You can see the veins. If the veins are too prominent, too thick, the leaf will be difficult to roll smooth. If there are tears or thin spots, the cigar will have a weak point. You want a leaf with consistent thickness and fine veining, and a colour that is even not patchy. This one is good. You lay it on the board and you begin to build the filler, the inner body of the cigar, from the shorter, less perfect pieces of leaf, stacking them in the way that controls the draw, the way air pulls through when someone smokes it. Too tight and it won't draw. Too loose and it burns too hot and fast. Your hands know this now. The first month, you thought about every step consciously, narrating it to yourself in Polish. Roll the filler into the binder, check the tension. Begin the wrapper from the head, the end that goes in the mouth, and spiral it down toward the foot with slight overlap, each turn precisely the same width as the last. Now, your hands do it without the narration. The room fills up as the other workers arrive. The benches run in rows and you face the bench across from you rather than the one beside you, which means your view is the back of the head of whoever is working opposite. Currently a young Romanian named Philip who came 3 months after you and is still in the stage where he thinks about every step. By 7 o'clock the room is producing. The sound of 22 people rolling cigars is specific and layered. The sound of the leaf, which is not silence, but a very soft sound, a kind of whispered friction. The sound of the cutters, the sound of someone rocking slightly on a stool, which happens when the work is going well. a kind of unconscious rhythm. The sound of the humidor being opened and closed, and under all of this conversation, not constant conversation, there are rules about conversation on the factory floor, rules that are enforced by Doherty with the specific economy of a man who's been enforcing rules for 20 years and has reduced the energy expenditure to a minimum. Talk quietly. Don't slow your hands. The production counts are tallied twice a day, and the counts are known to everyone in the room within about 20 minutes of the tally being done, which creates its own pressure. But people talk anyway, because 12 hours in silence with your hands is a particular kind of madness that even the most focused worker eventually needs to relieve. Benedetto talks. Benedetto is 41 years old and has a wife and 4 children in an apartment on Mott Street, which is the Italian section, a 10-minute walk from here. And he has opinions about everything, and the ability to communicate those opinions without slowing his hands below 210 cigars per day, which Doherty seems to have privately accepted as the cost of employing someone who is otherwise extremely good at his work. Today, Benedetto is talking about the heat, not complaining about the heat. Benedetto doesn't complain, or at least he has elevated complaining to such a philosophical plane that it stops being complaint and becomes analysis. He's saying that the heat is going to break this week, because the heat always breaks. He's saying that the newspapers are wrong about how long it will last, because the newspapers are always wrong about weather, because the newspapers employ men who look at weather from offices and not from streets. He is saying that when the heat breaks, there will be a thunderstorm of the kind that New York produces in summer, a storm that will come in from the west and hit the city like a wall and last maybe 2 hours and leave everything exactly as hot as before but briefly cleaner smelling. You've seen 2 of these storms already, once in early June and once in the first week of July. He is not wrong about them. They are violent and brief, and they produce a smell after a cold, wet, electrical smell that cuts through everything else for about an hour before the heat absorbs it. You ask him, without stopping your hands, whether his family is sleeping on the roof. He says his wife sleeps on the roof, but he doesn't, because his wife's cousin also sleeps on the roof with her 3 children, and he and this cousin disagree about something that happened 3 years ago, and the proximity on a 10 by 10 section of rooftop is not compatible with that disagreement remaining civil. You ask what they disagree about. He says a goat. You wait. He says in Naples he had a goat. This cousin, who lived nearby, borrowed the goat. The goat died. The cousin said it was the goat's fault. Benedetto says this is not how fault works. You think about saying something, you decide against it. Benedetto says he is not an unreasonable man. He says a goat that dies while in your care is your responsibility. He says this is simply correct. He says if the cousin had admitted this 7 years ago, there would be no problem. The cousin did not admit it. They're now in New York, the cousin on a different block, the goat still dead, the disagreement still structurally sound. You work. At 9 o'clock, a boy comes through the room with water. Not clean water in a cup, but water in a shared bucket with a ladle, which everyone drinks from. In 1887, nobody on this factory floor is thinking about the shared ladle as a disease vector, because germ theory is 20 years old, and its dissemination to factory floors in Lower Manhattan has been, to put it generously, incomplete. You drink. The water is warm and tastes slightly of the bucket, and you drink it anyway because you've been sweating since you woke up, and sweating since before that. Really? Because last night on the roof you were sweating all night, and the body has limits. Your shirt is wet across your shoulders by 9 o'clock. By 10 it's wet from collar to waist. The windows on the east side have been open since 7. They admit the sounds of Broome Street, which run below the factory in the same parallel universe that all Lower East Side streets run in during working hours. The constant commerce, the arguing, the specific Brooklyn Yiddish Italian Polish street accent of New York that is being invented right now on these streets and will eventually become the accent that people in the rest of the country for the next 100 years will use to signify city. A man below is selling something from a cart. You cannot hear exactly what. The rhythm of a sales call. The specific cadence of someone repeating an offer over and over to the passing crowd. At 10:30, something changes on the floor. It's not a sound. It's an absence of a sound, or rather a shift in the quality of what Benedetto is producing. He's been talking low and steady for 2 hours, and now he stops, and the stopping is different from the pauses he takes between points. He says quietly in Italian accented English, "You hear that? It is not quite a question. You listen. Somewhere below." From the direction of the toilet courtyard, accessible through the west side air shaft, a sound that is a person crying, except not quite. It's the sound that comes after a lot of crying. The dry, heaving, almost mechanical sound of a body going through the motions of grief without having anything left to produce. You look at Benedetto. He looks at his cigars. After a moment he says, "Mrs. Horvath's baby. She's been sick since Monday." He says it the way you say something you've known was coming. Not surprised, not unaffected, just placing a fact in its context. You look around the room. Philip has stopped rolling and is looking at the west window. The older woman at the corner bench, whose name is Hannah and who has been at this factory for 11 years, has not stopped rolling. Her hands continue, but her face is doing something, arranging itself around something, and you understand from this that she has heard this sound before, in this city, in this summer, in other summers like this one. The summer complaint is what people call it. Cholera infantum is the clinical term. What it is in 1887 is the thing that kills more children in New York City every summer than anything else. Infants and toddlers mostly. Under 5. Under 2 primarily. The mechanism is intestinal infection causing severe dehydration, and the cause of the infection is the contamination of milk and water and food by bacteria that thrive in heat. And the chain of events goes: summer arrives, heat rises, milk spoils faster, water grows more dangerous, infants drink what they're given, infants die. In August of 1882, the year of a particularly brutal heat wave, the New York City Board of Health recorded 1,600 deaths from cholera infantum in a single month. 1,600 in August alone. Mostly children under 2, mostly in tenement neighborhoods, mostly on blocks exactly like this one. This is 1887, and the rate is lower now than it was in 1882, and it is still catastrophic. Rivka Birnbaum is 5 years old. She's been sick since last week. She's on the rooftop now, or was when you left this morning, because the roof is 4 degrees cooler than the apartment at night. 4 degrees. But the women say it helps. They move the sick ones upward toward the open sky in summer, the way you'd move a plant toward a window, because instinct says moving toward air is right, even when the air is 90 degrees and thick with coal smoke. Benedetto begins talking again. Not about the baby, about something else, about a bill in the state legislature about labour hours. You understand this as what it is, something to fill the air that isn't the sound from the courtyard. You are grateful for it, and you feel guilty for being grateful, and you roll your cigar and your hands remember what to do even when your mind is somewhere else. By noon, you have 116 cigars, which is a normal pace. Your hands, on a good day, move faster in the afternoon when they've fully warmed up than in the morning. Your record is 242 in a 12-hour day. You've done it twice. The half-hour break at noon is for eating, if you have something to eat, and for existing outside the factory room for 30 minutes, which is not the same as rest, but is a different kind of not resting. You go down to the street. The street at noon in July is actually marginally hotter than the factory floor because there's no shade on Broome Street in the middle of the day, and the sun hits the cobblestones and the stone and brick of the buildings and radiates back with the specific enthusiasm of surfaces that have been absorbing solar energy for 6 hours. The air shimmers in a way that makes distant objects look uncertain, like they might not commit to staying where they are. There's a cart selling something at the corner of Broome and Eldridge. You walk over. The man behind the cart has a Russian accent and is selling niches, the small stuffed pastries that you have learned in 4 months to eat without thinking about, in the way that you eat your mother's cooking without thinking about it. Not because it's the same, but because it fills the same function. Calories, portability, the ability to eat while standing on a sidewalk in 30 seconds without negotiating a kitchen or a table. The niche is filled with potato and onion and costs 2 cents. You pay 2 cents. You eat it standing at the edge of the cart watching the street. Noon on the Lower East Side. Half a mile of Orchard Street and the blocks around it, and what you're looking at is a commercial ecosystem that has no real equivalent anywhere else in the world in 1887. The pushcart market is not just a few carts. It is hundreds of carts on dozens of streets. A mobile, daily self-organizing market that sells everything that the people in these tenements need to survive. Food, primarily, fish and pickles and bread and potatoes and onions and beets and whatever fruit has come in from the farms in New Jersey and Long Island that is slightly past its best, and therefore affordable. But also clothing, second-hand and new. Buttons and thread and needles for the women who do piecework at home, sewing garments that the garment factories send out. Tools, household goods, medicine, or what passes for medicine in 1887 in a neighbourhood where doctors are expensive, and the druggist on Hester Street does a brisk trade in patent remedies, whose primary active ingredient is generally alcohol or opium, both of which make you feel better until they don't. The noise is layered in the same way the smell is layered, except noise attacks faster and with less mercy. The vendors are the top layer, calling in Yiddish and Italian and Polish and the broken English of men who learned sales before they learned the language. Under them, the constant baseline roar of the crowd itself, of hundreds and hundreds of people doing the same thing at the same time on the same narrow streets. Under that, the horses, the carts, the metal wheels on stone, the elevated railway, which at noon runs a train every 7 minutes on the Second Avenue line, and whose noise, when a train passes, physically interrupts all other sound with a sound that is less heard and more felt, a vibration in your jaw and your chest that the merchants on the blocks below the L have stopped noticing, but that you, who walk under it twice a day, still sometimes flinch at. A boy runs past you carrying newspapers. He can't be more than 11. His shoes are worn to the point where the sole on the left one is coming away at the toe, and every few steps it slaps against the bottom of his foot with a small wet sound because his socks, or what remains of his socks, have soaked through with sweat. He's running anyway, running toward the corner where the men come out of the factories for their lunch breaks. because the lunch break is 30 minutes and you have that window to sell papers to people who are standing still enough to buy one. He shouts the headline as he runs. Something about the harbour. You eat the niche. A woman pushes past you with a large basket on her hip. A basket full of shirtwaist fronts, the embroidered or pleated fronts of shirts that she is taking home to finish, because the garment industry in 1887 runs on a 2-track system. There are the factories, the inside shops, where the cutting and most of the heavy sewing happens, and then there is the homework system, where sections of garments are sent out to women, mostly women, in the tenements, who finish them at home, by hand, by lamplight in the evenings after their other work is done, for a rate that comes out to about 3 cents an hour when you calculate it honestly, which the people paying the rate prefer not to. This woman has probably been sewing since 5 in the morning. She will deliver these finished fronts, collect her pay in coins and a new bundle of unfinished work, and start again this evening. Her expression tells you nothing, not misery and not contentment. The expression of someone who is doing the thing that needs to be done and doesn't have the surplus energy to register feeling about it. You think, I have 4 months here. She has years. How long does it take for your face to learn that? A man behind you says something in English and you realise he's talking to you. You turn. He's maybe 30, well dressed for this street, which means his coat is intact and his hat is real. He has a notebook. He says, "Excuse me, do you live in this neighbourhood?" You say, carefully, "Yes." He says, "I'm writing a piece for the Tribune about conditions in the tenements in summer. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" You look at him. You've seen men like this before. Not many, but a few. Men who come downtown with notebooks and look at things the way your uncle says artists look at things, as if the looking is the whole point and the thing being looked at is incidental. Your English is good enough for this conversation, barely. 4 months of using it every day, having to use it, has moved you from almost nothing to functional. You understand most of what's said to you if it's said slowly. You can express most of what you need to express. The gaps are significant but manageable. You say, "I have 20 minutes." He says, "That's plenty." His name is, he says, Thomas Jenkins, and he writes for the Tribune mostly about municipal affairs, and his editor has asked him to do a piece about the summer mortality rate in tenement districts, specifically about the rooftop sleeping situation, because somebody at the Board of Health said something about it at a public meeting that the reporter's editor found interesting. He asks, "Do people in your building sleep on the roof at night?" You say, "Yes." He asks, "Why?" You look at him. You say, "Because it is hot." He seems to feel this is insufficient and makes a note anyway. He asks how many people. You think about the roof last night, the 30 or so shapes in the not quite dark. You tell him maybe 30 people from your building and the building behind. He makes a note. He asks about sanitation on the roof, by which he means whether people are using the roof as a toilet, which is a concern the city apparently has, and which is not what you're using it for. You use the facilities on the ground floor for that, same as always, which involves going down 5 flights of stairs at 3 in the morning, but this is the arrangement and there is no alternative. He asks if it's dangerous on the roof. You think about what dangerous means in the context of the roof. The parapet walls are about 3 feet high, which is enough to keep a careful adult from accidentally stepping off, but not much more. The tar surface is uneven in places. There is no lighting of any kind. Children need to be watched at the edges. You say, you must be careful with children. He makes a note. He asks if you find it more comfortable to sleep on the roof than inside. You think about the apartment at midnight, which is a room of roughly 100 square feet containing 4 people, 2 of them children, the window facing a brick wall, the temperature at midnight still above 90. You think about the roof, which is hot and hard and smells of tar and the city, but where the sky is open and there is occasionally the memory of a breeze. You say, yes. He asks where you're from. You tell him. He asks when you arrived. You tell him. He asks what you do. You tell him. He asks, do you think you'll stay in New York? The question surprises you because it's the question you haven't asked yourself directly. Not because the answer isn't obvious, but because asking it makes it real in a way that is inconvenient. You say, I think yes. He closes his notebook, thanks you, and moves on to the next person eating a niche in front of the pushcart. You finish yours, you go back upstairs. Afternoon. The afternoon is the hardest part of the factory day in summer. By 2 o'clock, the east-facing windows, which helped in the morning by letting in the cooler morning light, are now trapping the accumulated heat of a full day's work and a full day's sun. The west windows face the air shaft, which in the afternoon is conducting not air but sound. The arguments of the courtyard below, the sounds of the toilet facilities, the thin, high crying of someone's child somewhere in the maze of rear courtyards that connect the backs of the tenements. The tobacco smell thickens in the heat. It becomes something heavier, more concentrated, a smell that is simultaneously sweet and pungent and slightly nauseating on days when you're already slightly nauseated from the heat. You have learned to breathe through it, or rather your body has stopped telling you it's there, which is the same thing differently. Your hands keep working. This is the thing about piecework that nobody who hasn't done it fully understands until they've done it. The work becomes a kind of meditation, except not a peaceful one. The repetition is so complete, the sequence of movements so fixed by training and practice, that your body can execute the work independently of your conscious mind for extended periods. Your hands are rolling cigars. Your mind is on the roof last night, or on Rosa Feldman reading her newspaper in the ambient light, or on your uncle's face when he told you about the tenement fire on Suffolk Street last winter, or on Halinka and the specific warmth of the top of her head. You come back when something goes wrong, when a leaf tears, or the tension is off, or the wrapper is splitting. Your hands register the error before your brain does, and your brain catches up with the correction already half made. By 4 o'clock you have 191 cigars. By 5:30, 227. At 6 o'clock, Doherty calls the count and you turn in your tally. 227. He writes it in his book without expression. You collect your day's wage, which at 3 cents per 10 comes to 68 cents, minus 2 cents for the use of the tools, which is a deduction that exists because it exists and whose legitimacy you have learned by watching what happened to others who questioned it, not to question. 66 cents for the day. You wash your hands at the basin on the landing. The water is brown because 20 other workers wash their hands before you, and the tobacco dust goes everywhere, and you rinse, and your hands still smell of tobacco at the end of it. You've accepted this. Your hands smell of tobacco the way a baker's hands smell of flour. It's just what your hands smell like now, out the door, into the street, the evening street. The evening street is different from the morning street in the way that an orchestra at full performance is different from the same orchestra warming up. Everything that was happening this morning is still happening, But the accumulated energy of a full day's commerce has been building toward this, and the pushcart market is at its peak, and the people coming off the second shift from the factories are joining the people who started their day at 5, and the street is doing everything simultaneously. You walk north up Eldridge toward Hester, toward the market. Your uncle's cart is at the corner of Hester and Ludlow, and you've learned to make a detour past it on your way home most evenings, because sometimes there is something left that didn't sell, and he'll hand it to you without ceremony, and you'll carry it home, and it goes toward dinner without anyone naming what it is that's happening, which is your uncle supplementing the household food supply in a way that preserves the fiction of the borders and your family being independent units sharing a space. Tonight he has herring, 3 pieces of herring wrapped in newspaper that he hands you with. Take this. Your mother is making something. You take the herring. It smells intensely of itself, the salt brine and the fish, a smell that is very specifically food, and not incidentally revolting depending on your relationship with salt herring, which is a relationship acquired through necessity. You don't stop to talk. He's still working, still calling out to the stream of people passing, still pulling business toward him through the specific gravity of long practice. Your uncle is very good at selling things off a cart. He has developed a manner that is simultaneously aggressive and somehow pleasant, an approach to selling that makes the customer feel attended to without feeling pressed, which is the correct balance for this particular market, where everyone has more sellers than buyers, and the difference between moving your goods and not moving them is personality as much as product. You continue north. You pass the Hebrew Emigrant Aid Society office on Essex Street, the window lit from inside at 6:30 because someone is always in there, someone always needing the service of an organisation whose entire function is orienting people who arrived at Castle Garden with nothing, and a letter of introduction written in a language the city doesn't speak. You were in there once in March, the week you arrived. A man with round glasses and a beard and a patience that seemed professionally acquired explained to you the basics. Where to register, where to find a doctor if someone was sick, which streets were which, and which to avoid after dark and which to be careful on even in the daylight. He gave you a map. Not a good map, a simple one, hand-drawn or cheaply printed, that showed the streets of the Lower East Side without any of the detail that would have made it actually useful, but which gave you the general framework within which all the other specific knowledge you've accumulated since then could be organised. You still have the map somewhere, in the bottom of the box under the cot. You turn onto Orchard Street and walk north, and you climb the 5 flights of stairs that are now so familiar. Your feet know them in the dark, which is useful because the stairwell lamp on the 3rd floor landing has been out for a week, and nobody has replaced it yet. Your mother is cooking. Your uncle's wife, Marta, is also in the kitchen, because the kitchen belongs to whoever is using it, and both women use it in the evenings, and the negotiation of the kitchen is a dance that happens around the shared stove on a schedule that was established in the first 2 weeks and has held since with the rigidity of custom, even though it was never formally agreed upon. Your mother cooks between 6 and 7. Marta cooks after 7. The boarders eat whenever. The kitchen smells of onions and something that might be potatoes and the herring you've brought, which your mother accepts from you without turning from the stove, which means thank you in the language of women who are simultaneously managing 4 things and can only allocate 1 hand to receiving additional food. Zofia is at the table doing something with a length of cloth. She's learning to sew, not from a teacher and not for the garment factories, not yet, but because your mother said in March that in this city learning to sew is as necessary as knowing how to walk. And Zofia, who is practical in the way that 12-year-olds who have seen their mother worry can become practical. Learn to take this seriously. She looks up when you come in and says, in Polish, "How was it?" You say, "The same." She nods. This is acceptable. Halinka is on the floor of the front room drawing something with a piece of chalk on the floorboards, which should not be permitted, but your mother has decided quietly to permit it. Because Halinka is 9 and needs something to do, and the floor is the only surface available and chalk comes off, you sit down on a cot. The cot is yours and your mother's shared cot, which in practice means it's your mother's cot, and you sleep on it before she comes to bed and vacate it when she arrives. The cot frame is wooden, and the canvas stretched between the rails was new in March and is already showing the shape of continuous use, a sag in the middle that you compensate for by sleeping slightly to one side. You sit on it. You take your shoes off. The shoes are leather with a worn heel on the right side that is approaching the point where it needs resoling. Resoling costs money. You've been rolling the heel inward when you walk to even out the wear, which is a short-term strategy. You are aware that it is a short-term strategy. You put the shoes under the cot. Your socks follow. Your feet feel the floor, which is old wood worn smooth in the middle of the room and rough at the edges, and the floor is cool relative to everything else, which is not actually cool, but the relative quality is real, and your feet appreciate it with the sincerity of things that have been inside leather all day in 90-degree weather. You lie back on the cot and you look at the ceiling. The ceiling is plaster over lath, and it is not in good repair. There is a water stain in the northwest corner that has been there since you arrived, and has not, as far as you can tell, grown or changed, which your uncle says means the pipe above it stopped leaking at some point and the stain is historical rather than active. There are 2 other marks you've been watching. A crack in the plaster near the window that runs from the window frame toward the centre, about 8 inches, and a dark spot near the door that your mother says is probably just dirt from a previous tenant's lamp placed too high. You look at the ceiling for exactly as long as it takes for the smell of cooking to become something that your body registers as dinner coming, and then you get up and you go wash your hands again at the tap on the landing, and you come back in and there is food. Dinner is potatoes and onion and the herring, stretched and seasoned with whatever your mother finds available, which in July means mostly dill and a small amount of pickled something, and bread that is the same bread from this morning, now a day and a half old and still perfectly edible if you don't think about the timeline. You eat at the table with your mother and Zofia and Halinka. Your uncle and his family eat in the other room. The boarders eat when they come in. Your family says what passes for grace in a household that is not particularly observant, but which maintains a relationship with observance the way you maintain a relationship with a distant relative. You know the forms, you perform them on the relevant occasions, you don't interrogate the underlying theology too closely. You eat. The food is good in the specific way that simple food prepared by someone who knows how to prepare it is good. Not complicated, not fancy. Your mother can do something with potatoes and herring and onion that makes them taste like they were meant to go together, which maybe they were. She learned this in a village kitchen, and she is applying it now in a tenement kitchen, and the principles are the same even if the equipment is different and the context is not what she imagined. After dinner, you stay at the table for a while. Your mother drinks her chicory coffee. Zofia goes back to her sewing. Halinka falls asleep on the floor next to her chalk drawings, which is something she does sometimes. Falls asleep wherever she is, like a cat that has decided the current location is sufficient. Your uncle comes in from his room and refills his coffee at the stove and stands at the stove for a moment. He's a compact man. Your uncle, 5'6", and built with the specific economy of someone who has spent years carrying weight. His hands are the hands you hope yours don't become, permanently swollen at the knuckle, the skin over the joints cracked and slow to heal, the colour of old leather. He says to you, not looking, heard there was trouble on Suffolk Street. You look at him. He says, tenement fire, 3rd floor. Don't know yet about how bad. He drinks his coffee. He says, it's the dry heat. Everything is dry. He goes back to his room. You think about this. Fire in a tenement is not the abstracted catastrophe it is in most buildings. It's not something that happens to buildings. It happens to the people inside them. Because the buildings are the people's entire world. Every possession, every source of income, every relationship the family has built since arriving in this country. When the building burns, everything burns. The clothes, the tools, the sewing equipment, the money the woman has hidden in a tin box under the bed, the documents, the letters from home, the photographs if there are photographs, which often there are not because photographs cost money. And then there's the structural reality. Tenements burn fast, built with cheap lumber, packed with flammable materials, lit with kerosene lamps and candles, connected by stairwells that act as chimneys. A fire on the 3rd floor in 1887 is not like a fire on the 3rd floor in a modern building with fire suppression and multiple exits. It's a stairwell fire and a courtyard fire and a building fire in rapid succession, and the water pressure from the street hydrants when the fire department gets there is frequently insufficient. The building on Suffolk Street is not your building, but it's 4 blocks away and you know people who live there. You think about this for a while and then you think about the heat and then you think about going up to the roof. It's 8:30. The light outside is finally losing its daylight intensity and becoming the bruised evening light that passes for night on the Lower East Side. The temperature in the apartment has not dropped below 92 degrees since approximately June 15th. The temperature outside is perhaps 90, which is not better in any absolute sense, but is marginally better in the sense of not being inside. You pick up your blanket. Your mother, without looking up, be careful. You say, yes. You go up. The roof in the evening is a different thing from the roof at night. At night it is dark and quiet and private in a way nothing else in this building is private. In the evening it is alive. When you push open the door to the roof, which is a plank door with a latch that doesn't fully close, the noise and the warmth hit you together. Not the noise of the street, though that comes too from below. The noise of people. The noise of 30 or 40 people occupying a space together in the evening with no particular agenda, except to be out of their apartments. Children are running. There are at least a dozen children on this roof right now, running between the adults, around the chimney stacks, along the parapet wall that is absolutely not safe for running, but which all children everywhere, confronted with a raised edge, will immediately run along. A group of women are sitting together near the water tower. They're talking. Not one conversation, but several, overlapping the specific acoustic phenomenon of a group of women who know each other well enough that conversations can start and stop and loop back without anyone losing track of the threads. They are talking in Yiddish, 3 of them, and in Polish, 2 of them, and the Yiddish and Polish share enough vocabulary from enough centuries of proximity that the conversations are not fully separated, they're touching at the edges. Mrs. Birnbaum is there. Rivka, the sick daughter, is asleep against her side. The girl's face, even in the evening light, is not the face of a well child. It is the face of a child who's been sick long enough that the sickness has left marks. the slightly sunken eyes, the pallor that shows even in dark hair and dark skin, the limpness. You nod to Mrs. Birnbaum. She nods back. Her face says, "I know. You know too. You've watched the arc of this for a week. You don't say anything about it because there is nothing useful to say, and useless speech in the presence of this kind of waiting is worse than silence." Near the east parapet, two men are talking. One of them you know, Avigdor Katz from the 4th floor, who works as a cutter in a garment factory on Division Street, and who has, in the 4 months you've been here, established himself in your mind as someone with opinions about labour organising that he is willing to share at any opportunity, and which you are roughly in agreement with on the general principles but exhausted by on the level of sustained conversation. The other man you don't know, he's speaking Yiddish, and from the fragments you catch gesturing at the city, he's discussing something about a union meeting. You go to the west side of the roof. This is the better view. The rooftop of this building faces west toward the back of the building on Allen Street, and above the roofline of the Allen Street building you can see a stripe of sky that faces the river, the Hudson River, which is 3 miles west from here. You can't see the river, but in the evening when the light is going you can sometimes see the sky above it doing something different, opening up, the compressed canyon sky of the Lower East Side expanding toward the open water. Right now the sky in that direction is the colour of copper going dark. Below the roofline, directly below you, the rear courtyard of the building. The courtyard is the space between the building's front section and its back section, a narrow rectangle of brick and cobblestone that serves as the access to the toilet facilities and the shared wash basins and where the building's garbage accumulates between collections. In the evening the courtyard is relatively quiet. A few women at the basins washing things. The light down there is indirect, borrowed from the buildings around it. The smell from the courtyard rises. You've stopped noticing it except on hot, still days, when there's no movement of air and it becomes more insistent. Tonight there's a slight southward movement, enough to carry most of it away from where you're standing. You unfold your blanket. You spread it on the tar near the west parapet, not too close to the edge, close enough to feel like you're near something open. You sit. From here you can see the rooftops of the surrounding buildings. Most of them have people on them too, not everyone. The building to the south has only a few figures. The building to the north has more, and there are children up there as well. Someone on the building across the Allen Street alley has hung a lantern, a small oil lantern on a hook near their parapet, and its light reaches you as a faint warm glow that is less useful for seeing by and more useful as a kind of presence, a marker of human habitation in the darkness. Rosa Feldman comes through the roof door. She has a newspaper and something wrapped in cloth that turns out, when she settles near the water tower, to be bread and something else. She spreads her blanket with the efficient movements of someone who has done this many times, sits and opens the paper. You watch her for a moment, not in the way that makes it strange, in the way that you watch things when you're sitting still and there's nothing urgent requiring your attention, and the evening's at the point where the day is ending and the night hasn't started, and everything is briefly suspended. She looks up, catches you looking, and does not look away immediately. She says, in Polish, "You have more news about the fire on Suffolk." You say in Polish, "Only what my uncle said. 3rd floor. I don't know more." She says, "Mrs. Goldstein from the 2nd floor went to see. She'll know when she comes back." She goes back to her paper. After a moment she says, not looking up, "Do you know anyone there?" You say, "Maybe." I know a man from the factory who I think lives nearby. She nods, says nothing. There's a kind of conversation that happens on rooftops that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's partly the sky, which is larger up here than anywhere at street level, where the buildings narrow it to a strip. It's partly the distance from the rooms below, the slight physical separation from the compressed life of the apartments. And it's partly just the heat, which has a way of removing the social scaffolding around conversation, the formality and the caution, because everyone up here is equally stripped down to their basic situation of being hot and tired and alive and trying to get through the night. You say to Rosa after a while, "When you came here, did it take long to understand the city?" She looks up from the paper. She considers the question with the seriousness it apparently deserves. She says, "It still takes. I've been here 2 years, and there are days I understand nothing." You say, "But less than at the beginning." She says, "Less, but also differently. When I first arrived, I didn't understand the language or the streets or the buildings or why anything happened the way it did. Now I understand most of that. But now I understand enough to see the things I still don't understand, which is worse in a way. When you don't know what you don't know, you can be confused without knowing you're confused. When you know more, you know exactly which things are still dark." She looks at you. She has a way of looking at you directly, this girl, without the sliding away quality that most people have when they're talking to someone they don't know very well. She just looks. She says, "Where did you work before you came here?" You say, "On the land. My father had a piece of land. He died when I was 15. After that it was harder. There was a cousin who wanted the land, and eventually the cousin got the land. So we came here." She says, "My father was a teacher in Vilna." There was no place for a Jewish teacher in Vilna by 1885, not really. He tried to stay. He sent us ahead. A pause. She says, "He's coming. He's been saying for 2 years that he's coming." I believe he's coming. The way she says it, the structure of the sentence, believing becoming an act of will rather than a state of knowledge. You don't say anything. You understand that she's told you something real, and she doesn't need you to respond with something lighter. Below, the city does its evening things. The elevated railway sends a train south on 2nd Avenue. The sound swelling and then receding, the brief sweep of light from the windows crossing the rooftop and moving on. Children near the water tower shriek at something, a game or a near miss at the edge, and one of the mothers says something sharp and everyone recalibrates toward the centre of the roof. From somewhere to the north, a fire bell. Not a fire engine passing, not the mechanical alarm that precedes the engine company. A single bell, repeated. The neighbourhood alarm system that has been functioning in some form in New York since the Dutch. The bell in the fire watchtower on some high building striking once and then again, and then the number of strikes that indicates the district. Everyone on the roof stops. Not dramatically. They stop the way people stop when a sound means something. You count 1, 2, 3. A pause. 1. The district number. Avigdor Katz says from the east parapet, "That's not Suffolk." Someone else says, "That's closer." You stand up and go to the north parapet, the low brick wall on the north side of the roof. You look north. For a moment, nothing. The roof lines, the water towers, the dark shapes of buildings against the not quite dark sky. Then, the orange, not a large orange, not yet. A glow at the roofline of a building maybe 3 or 4 blocks north. The kind of orange that is not a lamp and not a street gas fixture, and that the eye recognizes immediately. before the brain has fully processed it as the specific orange of fire. More people come to the parapet. The orange grows. It goes from a glow to a column. And from the column there begins to be smoke. Black smoke visible even against the dark sky because it's dense and moving, and it has the specific quality of something structural burning. Not a kitchen fire, not a lamp overturned, but something that has taken hold of the building itself. From the count of the bell, approximately which block this is. Avigdor says the street name. You don't know the building specifically, but you know the block. You've walked past it. It's a building like this one, 7 stories, 400 people, the same wood and plaster and kerosene and summer dry air. Mrs. Birnbaum pulls Rivka closer. The women have stopped talking. The children have come to the parapet. One of the mothers tries to pull them back, then gives up. Because where do you put them? And maybe it's important that they see this, and maybe it isn't. And in the heat of the moment the decision is not made, just not unmade. You watch the fire. I need you to understand what you're watching. This isn't a house fire. This isn't the kind of fire that you think of when you think of fire in a modern context, where the building has fire stairs and sprinklers, and the alarm system calls the fire department before anyone has registered the smoke. This is a tenement fire in 1887, and the architecture of the building you're watching is a nearly perfect mechanism for fire propagation. The stairwells run from bottom to top without fire doors or compartmentalization. The wooden floors and the wooden partitions between rooms, the layers of old wallpaper and the grease that accumulates in kitchen walls over years of cooking, the kerosene stored in cans in apartments that don't have safe storage for kerosene, the fabric of the garment workers' homework piled on tables, the newspapers, the dry summer wood of every frame and fitting in a building that has been absorbing 90-degree heat for 3 weeks. When a fire starts in a tenement, it goes upstairs. The upper floors are the worst place to be. The fire bell is ringing continuously now, and from somewhere to the south you can hear the sound of the fire engine approaching, the horses at full run on cobblestones, the bell on the engine itself, a different sound from the alarm bell, higher and rhythmic. The orange column from the north building has grown to something that is sending embers upward. Small hot fragments visible against the dark sky, drifting south on the wind that is finally moving. Someone on your rooftop says, "The wind is blowing south." You all know what that means. Embers from a burning building don't respect property lines. They travel with the wind and they land on roofs, and the roofs of Lower East Side tenements in July, after 3 weeks of dry heat, are covered in tar that has been baking in the sun for 6 hours a day for 3 weeks, and the roof structures underneath the tar are wood, and the laundry that people hang on rooftop lines has not been taken down, because people sleep near their laundry lines up here. And you look at the line of laundry across the south end of this roof. Several women have the same thought simultaneously. They're moving before anyone says anything, unhooking sheets and shirts and the small garments of children from the lines, pulling them into piles, carrying them toward the roof door. Not running. Moving with the specific efficiency of people who are afraid, but who are managing the fear into action. You help. You go to the nearest line. You start pulling things down. You don't know whose they are. In this moment, it doesn't matter whose they are. The sheet in your hands is dry. So dry that the fold lines in it have a slightly brittle quality. The cotton fibres stressed by the heat in the days of sun. You pull it off the line and fold it roughly in half and add it to the pile by the door. Rosa is at the line on the east side. She's moving fast, her hands certain. The children have been pulled back from the north parapet by their mothers. Rivka Birnbaum has woken up and is crying. Not loudly. The quiet, persistent crying of a sick child who doesn't know what's wrong and is reporting that something is wrong. Mrs. Birnbaum holds her and watches the fire, and her face does the thing faces do when two fears are competing for the same space. The fire engine reaches the burning building. You can hear it. The horses stopping, the men shouting, the sound of equipment being deployed. The water pressure in Lower East Side streets is, in 1887, frequently inadequate. The water mains that served this part of the city were designed for a city less dense than the current city. When multiple fire companies connect to the same hydrant system in the same area, the pressure can drop to the point where the water barely reaches the third floor. The burning building is 7 stories. You've seen these things in the newspaper since you arrived. 3 buildings destroyed on Christie Street in April. A building on Mulberry Street in May where 4 people died on the upper floors. Last winter, the one your uncle mentioned on Suffolk Street. In 1882, the year of the bad heat, the papers had so many tenement fires in August that they started reporting them as a category, a statistic, rather than as individual events. You take the last piece of laundry off the line on your section of roof, a child's dress, yellow and very small, the kind that fits a 2-year-old. You fold it. You add it to the pile. You go to the north parapet and you look. The fire has taken 3 floors of the target building, as far as you can estimate from here. The orange is vivid and wrong against the city sky, and the smoke is moving south. South toward you, south toward this block. Though the wind is not strong and the distance is 3 or 4 blocks, and the embers will mostly cool before they travel that far. Mostly. Avigdor Katz is watching with the expression of a man performing a calculation. He says, "We're probably fine. The word probably does what probably always does when applied to survival situations. You look at the building next to you on the north side, the one whose roof connects to this one through the informal cut door. The people on that roof are also watching, also moving laundry, also doing the communal triage of an emergency that may or may not reach you. A woman on that roof catches your eye across the 10 feet of parapet gap. You don't know her. She's maybe 40, wearing an apron, her grey-black hair pinned up in the way that women in this neighbourhood pin their hair in summer, the back of the neck bare. She's carrying a basket of laundry she's just pulled down. She looks at you. She looks at the fire. She looks back at you. She shrugs. The shrug says, 'What can you do?' The shrug says, 'This is where we live.' The shrug says, 'I have been afraid before and will be again, and right now I am doing what I can do and the rest I cannot control.' You nod. She goes back to her laundry. The fire burns for another 2 hours by the time the engine companies get it under control. You stay on the roof the whole time, because going inside and not knowing feels worse than staying outside and watching. Others do too. The card players near the chimney have stopped their card game and joined the watchers at the north parapet. The women who are in conversation are now silent, watching. The orange column shrinks, not all at once, gradually, unevenly, the way all fires end when water and fire argue, in stages, the upper floors going dark first, then the lower ones, with a long period in the middle where it looks like it's out and then flares again. By 10 o'clock, it's out. The smoke continues for another hour. You can smell it from here, the specific smell of a burned building, which is not the clean smell of a campfire but a heavier thing, the smell of everything the building contained, Furniture and clothing and food and paper, all of it reduced to something denser. People begin drifting away from the parapet. The children are taken down. Mrs. Birnbaum carries Rivka down because the girl has been awake and crying for an hour, and the height and the excitement and the fear have not helped whatever is happening in her small body. You stay. You stay at the north parapet and you look at the sky where the orange was. It's gone now, replaced by the normal bruised purple of the city. The smoke column is still there, but lower, horizontal now rather than vertical as it disperses at rooftop level. Rosa comes to stand beside you. She looks north. Then she looks at you. She says, "Does this happen in Poland?" You say, "Fires." "Yes, but not like this. Not buildings like this." She says, "When my brother first wrote to me about New York before I came, he said it was the most alive city in the world. He said it was electric. He said you could feel the energy in the street like a current." She pauses. She says, "He wasn't wrong, but he didn't mention that the electricity sometimes burns the house down." You look at her. She's not smiling exactly, but there's something in her face that is close to it. The specific expression of someone who finds something true and terrible and darkly funny at the same time, which is an expression you've seen a lot on the Lower East Side. You say, "He also didn't mention the smell." She laughs. An actual laugh, not large but real. She says, "No, no one mentions the smell." Below, from Orchard Street, the sound of the last of the evening vendors packing up their carts, the scrape of wheels on cobblestone, the clatter of something being loaded, the voices of men saying words you can't make out from up here. The city is not silent. The city is never silent, but it's quieter, and the quiet has a particular quality at this hour, the hour after an emergency, when the emergency is resolved without claiming anyone you know, and you can feel, physically feel, the relaxation of the held breath. You breathe out. You go back to your blanket near the west parapet. You sit down. After a while, Rosa goes back to her blanket near the water tower. The card players restart their game by candlelight. The building settles around you with the specific noises of a building settling, wood contracting as the heat gradually, reluctantly, fraction by fraction begins to ease. Not comfortable, not cool, just slightly less than before. You lie down. You look at the sky. The copper and orange are gone from the west, and the sky is its normal bruised purple. Two planes of cloud are moving from the west, moving slow. Not the clouds that bring rain necessarily, but clouds. Something textured in the sky that has been flat and hazy for 3 weeks. Benedetto said the heat would break. You think about the day, the factory, the niches, the reporter with his notebook, the smell of tobacco and sweat, and the woman from the garment factory carrying her bundle, the herring from your uncle's cart, the fire bell in the evening, the orange column, the woman on the next roof shrugging. You think about Rivka Birnbaum and the sound from the courtyard that morning, from the cigar factory courtyard, from whoever's child was sick on the floor below. 2 separate instances. The summer complaint moving through the building the way it moves through every building in this neighborhood every summer. The invisible opponent that kills with consistency and impersonality. You think about what the reporter asked. Do you think you'll stay? And the answer is what you said. Yes. Probably yes, because what's the alternative? The land is your uncle's cousin's now, or was it the cousin's wife's family? The story has a different character depending on who tells it. There is nothing to go back to except the fields that were never fully yours. And here there is at least the progression of things, however slow and costly. 66 cents today, and in a year maybe more. and in several years may be enough of a surplus to think about something beyond survival. And Zophia's English is getting better every week. She picks it up the way children do, without the friction that adults have, absorbing it from the street and the neighbours, and the 2 hours a week in the school on Grand Street, where they teach immigrants' children, and which your mother found and insisted upon, and which Zophia attends with the seriousness of someone who understands that this is the thing that will make the future different from the present. And Alinka draws with chalk on the floor and falls asleep wherever she is and is alive and well, and currently being insufficiently dramatic about her life in a way that you find deeply reassuring. You close your eyes. The tar under the blanket is warm. The city continues below. From somewhere on the roof, still, the low voices of the card players, unhurried now, a late-night conversation that has moved from cards to something else. The specific late-night conversation of men who stay up past when they should because the day is over and the night is still theirs. From below, the street. Quieter now, but not gone. From the north, nothing. The fire is out. The smoke dispersing. You breathe, in and out. The air is still hot, but it has changed slightly in the last hour, the way air changes when clouds move in somewhere in the upper atmosphere and interrupt the direct transmission of heat from the day. Not cool, but different. The memory of the possibility of a breeze. There's something I want you to understand about this roof. I know it seems like a last resort, like the place people go when the apartment is too terrible to endure, and it is that. I'm not going to romanticize the dumbbell tenement system, or the density of the Lower East Side in 1887, or the conditions that sent people to rooftops because they couldn't breathe in their own homes. But the rooftop is also something else. In a city that gives working people almost no common space, the rooftop is common space. It belongs to whoever can get there. It's not for customers or employers or the municipal authorities or the landlords who own every surface below it. It's just open. Open to the sky and to whoever climbs the stairs. What Jacob Riis, the photographer who would document these neighbourhoods in his book 3 years from now, would not fully capture in his photographs is the rooftop as community. He documented the interiors, the dark rooms, the crowded beds, the faces of exhausted people in insufficient light. He photographed what was wrong. He had a gift for what was wrong. What was also true, what the photographs didn't show, was what happened on the roofs in summer. The network of women talking across the parapet gaps. The children who knew every chimney stack and water tower on 3 connected rooftops. The men who played cards and argued about unions and watched the weather together. The way that 30 families who shared a building but had limited contact in the corridors below became, on summer evenings, something more continuous, something like a community. The rooftop was the one place in the tenement where you could see farther than the wall in front of you. In an apartment, your horizon is the wall. In the stairwell, the wall. In the street, the buildings, 6 or 7 stories, pressing in on both sides, the sky reduced to a strip. But on the rooftop, the sky opens. And in a city that was trying very hard to convince its newest arrivals that they were small and replaceable and infinitely substitutable one for another, the sky was not nothing. You open your eyes and you look at it. The clouds that were moving in from the west are closer now. Not threatening, not the storm clouds of a real weather change, just the ordinary clouds of a summer night moving in from somewhere else. They cover the narrow band of stars above the centre of Orchard Street. They uncover them again. This is the movement of the world above this particular rooftop. The stars don't know about the fire on the block to the north. The clouds don't know about Rivka Birnbaum. The weather system moving in from the west has no knowledge of dumbbell tenements or the summer complaint, or the 66 cents you made today rolling 227 cigars. It just moves, and you are under it. You've been in New York 4 months, and you've already stopped counting the months the way you counted them when you first arrived, when every week felt like a separate event to be named and remembered. The weeks are blurring now into the texture of the life. This is what your uncle looked like when he talked about his first years, the way time had compressed in retrospect, the individual days gone, the shape remaining. You can feel it happening to you, the compression beginning, the individual days starting to file into each other, and part of you wants to resist it because the day you arrived, the specific smell of Castle Garden, and the specific feeling of stepping off the boat into a city that was too large and too loud and too fast, those things feel important to retain, as if they are evidence of something, the distance you've come. But memory doesn't work on request. You keep what you keep, and you lose what you lose, and the city keeps moving. From the south, from the direction of the river, a sound that might be wind. You lie on your side on the blanket. The tar is warm under you. Your shirt is dry now, or drier, the sweat of the day mostly given back to the air. Your feet are bare, and the air around them is the closest to cool of anything on this roof at this hour. You should sleep. Tomorrow is the same as today mostly. The stairs at 6, the walk to Broome Street, the smell of the tobacco room, 200 and more cigars, Doherty and his ledger, Benedetto and his analysis of weather patterns and labour organising, and the relative merits of different varieties of tobacco wrapper, the noon Knish or whatever the cart on the corner is selling tomorrow, the walk home, the dinner, the 5 flights of stairs with the broken lamp on the 3rd floor landing, and the roof again, the same roof, the same sky, unless it rains. If it rains, the roof becomes what rooftops are supposed to be, impermeable surfaces that direct water away from the interior of the building, and the people on the roof become people scrambling in the dark to gather their blankets and their things and get down the stairs before they're soaked, which is a comedy your uncle has described in detail, and which he seems to find more funny in retrospect than it apparently was in the moment. But if it doesn't rain, if the heat holds, which it has held for 3 weeks and which your body has accepted as the permanent condition of this summer, you'll come back up here tomorrow evening and spread the blanket on the same section of tar and lie down under the same city-stained sky and listen to the same card players and the same conversations drifting across from the next roof. And it won't be exactly the same, because nothing is exactly the same twice. Mrs. Birnbaum and Rivka will be there, or they won't, and the fire 3 blocks north will be discussed or not, and Rosa Feldman will be reading or not, and something will have happened during the day that changes the specific texture of the evening. But the shape will be the same. And in a city that is always changing, that is in fact defined by change, by the constant churn of new arrivals and new buildings and new businesses replacing old ones before anyone has fully processed the old ones. The sameness is not nothing. The sameness is a kind of home. You close your eyes. The sound of the city is there. It's always there. But your ears have learned what your nose learned months ago. To file the constant away and notice only the new, the changed, the specific. The horse on Orchard Street, the one metal wheel rim on cobblestone is familiar. The train on 2nd Avenue is familiar. The low voices of the card players behind you are familiar. What's new is the slight movement of air from the south. And the smell, something in the air that wasn't there this morning. Something the clouds brought with them from wherever the clouds came from. Something that smells, faintly, impossibly, of rain that hasn't arrived yet but is somewhere to the west, somewhere in the direction of the river and the open country beyond. The smell of water falling through clean air. Benedetto said the heat would break. It doesn't break tonight. But tonight it leans slightly, a fraction of a degree, in the direction of something that isn't this, in the direction of the storm that hasn't come yet, and the September that's still 7 weeks away, and the first day in October when you'll wake up and the air will be cool enough that you'll need to close the window, cool enough that sleeping inside will be possible, cool enough that the roof will be a choice again rather than a necessity. Tonight you're still here, warm tar through the blanket, stars or clouds, this city in its constant low roar. You're thinking about Rivka Birnbaum. You're thinking about the way Mrs. Birnbaum looked tonight when she held her daughter and watched the fire. 2 fears in the same face, the fire and the thing that was already there. You're thinking about the woman on the next roof with her shrug, the shrug that said, "This is where we live." And it is. This is where you live. Not the country outside Krakow, not the field that was your father's field, not the village that is getting smaller in your memory every week, replaced by the immediate and the actual. This rooftop, this tar, this city, you breathe in. The air is still warm, still city air, still carrying everything the city carries. But there's something in it tonight. 4 months you've been here, and there are still things you're seeing for the first time. Things you're understanding that you couldn't understand before you understood other things. The city is that kind of place. It yields its knowledge slowly and in the order it decides, not the order you'd choose. What you know is this. The roof is yours tonight, not yours alone, but yours to use. Yours to lie on under the open sky with the rest of the people from your building and the building behind. Yours to watch the fire from, and yours to haul laundry across, and yours to have a real conversation on for the first time in a week with a girl who reads newspapers by urban ambient light. Yours. In a city that seems to belong to no one except the people who already had money, and the Tammany men who manage the gap between the people with money and the people without it, for a fee that everyone knows about and no one names. This roof belongs to everyone on it, and everyone on it is here because they made a choice, which is the same choice in different forms. Go up. When the rooms below become impossible, go up. When the walls press in, go up. When the heat is winning and the airshaft is breathing the wrong direction, and there is no relief anywhere in the 4 walls of your life, go up. Climb the stairs, push through the plank door, stand on the tar under the open sky. You're not a tourist here. You're not visiting this city and looking at it from the outside. You're in it. You're making cigars and eating niches and getting your news from your uncle at the end of the day, and sharing a kitchen with your mother and sleeping on the roof because it's too hot to sleep anywhere else. You're becoming someone the city is making. The boy from outside Krakow is still here somewhere. The one who had never seen a building taller than the church steeple, who stood at Castle Garden in March and looked at Lower Manhattan and felt his understanding of what a city was get completely rewritten in about 30 seconds. He's still in you. You can still feel him, especially in moments of vertigo, when the scale of the city or the density of the people or the speed of the commerce hits you at an angle that your rational mind can't absorb fast enough. But he's not in charge anymore. The one in charge now knows the walk to Broome Street by feel, knows which end of the factory floor Doherty watches from, and which angle to approach his bench from when you're a minute late, knows the particular weight of a good wrapper leaf and the particular give of a well-built cigar, and the precise calculation of 66 cents in 12 hours, knows the roof. The specific sounds of the roof at night, the card game behind the chimney stack, the occasional shriek of a child being pulled back from the parapet, the low hum of women's conversation that never fully stops, the passage of the trains on 2nd Avenue every 15 minutes, the breathing of the sleeping people all around you. You can hear it all now without hearing any of it, which is how you know it's become home. From somewhere below, a baby crying. Not Rivka, someone else's child. The ordinary crying of a child who woke up and doesn't like what it found. A voice somewhere on the lower floors saying something soothing, and the crying stopping. From the north, nothing. No orange. No smoke visible now that the fire is out. From the west, the wind that is almost a wind. Your eyes are heavy. The day has been in your body all day, every hour of it. The walking and the standing and the 12 hours of precise handwork, and the fear of the fire and the careful management of that fear, and the conversation with Rosa. And before all of that, the night on the roof before this one. The same roof, the same hot tar, the same non-sleep that constitutes sleep up here, which is less unconsciousness than a kind of horizontal existence, where your body recovers what it can while remaining loosely aware of the open sky and the city below. You're tired in all the ways you can be tired simultaneously. But there's something else too, something that is not quite the tiredness. Today you watched a building burn 3 blocks away, and it wasn't your building. Today, a child in your building is sick and may or may not be the same child tomorrow morning. Today you made 66 cents for 12 hours of precise work with your hands, and tomorrow you'll do it again. Today the reporter asked you if you'll stay, and you said yes. Today the sky opened up above this roof, and you could see farther than the wall in front of your face. And for the minutes you were looking at the fire, and the minutes you were looking at the clouds moving in from the west, and the minutes Rosa was beside you at the north parapet, you were not a single isolated unit in the most anonymous city on earth. You were part of the thing on the roof, part of the community that forms when the rooms below become impossible, part of the city that exists above the city of rooftops and water towers and laundry lines, and the informal cut-through doors between buildings, and the understanding that in summer the roof belongs to everyone. Your breathing slows. The tar is warm. The city is doing its things. Somewhere in this building, Mrs. Birnbaum is awake with Rivka, and you know this without having to check. You know it the way you know things about the building now, by feel, by the texture of the night. Somewhere your mother is asleep in the room below, and Zofia and Halinka, and the 2 boarders, and your uncle's family, 12 people in 4 rooms, the rhythm of 12 sets of lungs moving through the night in the heat. Somewhere Benedetto Caruso is in his apartment on Mott Street not sleeping because his wife's cousin is on the same roof as him, and the goat is still dead, and the summer is still long, and the proximity is still insufficient for the disagreement to stay civil. Somewhere the men who are in the burning building are standing in the street with whatever they manage to carry down. Or they're in someone else's apartment, or they're in the street, or they're at a cousin's on a different block, because this is how the tenement community works. When one building goes, the other buildings absorb it. Not generously. There is no generosity in an apartment where 12 people are already sharing 4 rooms. But the mechanisms of absorption exist. The cousin on the other block, the landsman who came from the same village, the synagogue that opens its basement, the mutual aid society that has a small emergency fund and a list of contacts. The city is brutal, and it is not entirely without mercy. These are not opposites. They are the same city. The orange is gone from the north. Above you, the clouds have covered the narrow band of visible stars. The air smells of rain that hasn't come. Your hands are on your chest, the right hand over the left, the way you've been sleeping on this rooftop since the middle of June. A position that is not comfortable exactly, but which is what your body has settled into as the position for sleeping on a hard surface with insufficient padding. Your hands smell of tobacco. They will always smell of tobacco now, or for the foreseeable now, which is the same thing at 18. Your hands know things now that they didn't know in March. Your eyes know things, your feet know the streets, your ears know the sounds. 4 months. It took 4 months for the city to start being the city instead of the idea of the city. For the distance between what you expected and what you found to close, not by the city becoming what you expected, but by you becoming someone who lived in what actually was. What actually was is 92 degrees on the 5th floor, 6 cents per dozen wrappers, the smell of the air shaft in summer, the way the elevated railway sounds when you're standing directly underneath it, your uncle's hands. What actually was is also Rosa reading by City Glow, the woman on the next roof and her shrug, Benedetto and the goat he won't let go, the card players behind the chimney, the children running along the parapet wall that you catch your breath watching. What actually was is the sky, which is the same sky that was over the field outside Krakow when you were 15. And your father was still alive and the shape of your life was completely different. The same sky, different city below it. You are in it now. You breathe. The breath in, tobacco and tar and coal smoke and the faint ghost of rain somewhere to the west. The breath out. The day, all of it, releasing into the night air, into the bruised purple sky above the Lower East Side of Manhattan, in the summer of 1887, the breath in, the breath out, the breath in. From somewhere very close, the sound of someone else breathing in sleep. Philip, maybe, or one of the men from the floors below who you know by face and not by name. The sound of a sleeping person, a full, complete sound, the breath, and the occasional shift of weight on the tar. You match your breathing to it without deciding to. In, out. The city is always moving. That's what the city does. It moves and it makes noise and it asks things of you and it doesn't stop asking. In the morning it will be doing everything it's doing right now. The bakeries and the laundries and the factory floors and the pushcart market and the 2nd Avenue train, and the children on the parapet and the one cold water tap on the 5th floor landing, running its brown trickle into whatever container someone has left under it. But that's morning. But morning comes from the east, and it announces itself with the bells of however many churches are within earshot, a number that in the Lower East Side is surprisingly large because the various immigrant communities have built their places of worship with the speed and commitment of people for whom religious community is the first infrastructure they establish when they arrive somewhere new. The bells will ring, the city will start, the stairwell, Broome Street, 200 and more cigars, your hands knowing what to do. But first there is this. The roof in the hour before sleep finally comes, the hour when the day has been given back to itself, when the arguments of the factory floor and the fear of the fire and the specific careful work of existing in this city with this much difficulty have dissolved into the warm night air, and what's left is just the body, just the breath, just the sky overhead and the tar below, and the sounds of the city that have become, in 4 months, indistinguishable from the sounds of home. You are warm enough, you are fed enough, you are safe enough. The roof is yours. The city is learning you and you are learning the city, and the learning is not done, will not be done for years, may never be fully done, because the city doesn't stop and you don't stop and the distance between you keeps reconfiguring. But tonight you are on the roof. Tonight the heat is slightly less than it was. Tonight somewhere to the west there is rain that hasn't come but is thinking about it. Tonight Rosa is on the other side of the water tower, and the card players are winding down behind the chimney stack, and Mrs. Birnbaum is holding Rivka, and your mother is sleeping below, and the city is doing its constant work of being the city. And you are here. Exactly here. On a tar rooftop on Orchard Street in the summer of 1887, 18 years old and 4 months in, the smell of tobacco on your hands and the memory of a breeze on your face. Let sleep come. Let it come the way it comes on the roof, which is different from how it comes indoors, softer and wider, like falling into something rather than being taken by something. Let the city recede, not disappear. It won't disappear. It will be here in the morning with everything it has. The stairs and the streets and the factory and the heat that tomorrow may be slightly less, and the day after that still less, and eventually, the first cool morning of September when you'll wake up, and for a moment you won't know why the air feels different, and then you'll understand, and it will feel like arriving somewhere new, the way you arrive somewhere new in March. Except this time you'll know the streets and the stairs and the sounds, and you'll know which curve in the factory room gives you the best light, and you'll know the walk from Broome Street in your feet. You'll know where you are, right now. You're on the roof. The city is below you, the sky is above you, the bruised purple sky of a city that never fully goes dark. The sky that takes what the gas lamps give it and makes it something specific, something that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. This exact sky above this exact island, the sky that 10,000 people on 10,000 rooftops are looking at right now, all of them in the same heat, all of them between the city and the stars. Good night.